Hey everyone, I'm Charlotte and I'm the president of the Black Student Union.
Hey, I'm Selah and I'm the vice president of the Black Student Union.
So today we're going to be starting our first assembly for Black History Month, and we're going to be talking about the history of elements of Black culture and how they've become mainstream, and then the disparity between how Black people versus non-Black people are often treated when they embrace elements of Black culture. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is Ebonics, African American Vernacular English, and Black Vernacular English. These all describe the same things, and there are existing arguments for and against each name for this particular dialect, so we've included the most common ones. I'm going to call it AAVE in this presentation, but it's the dialect of English created by and predominantly spoken by African Americans. So AAVE was first created by Black enslaved people throughout English-speaking parts of the Americas during slavery. And it sounds the way it sounds because most Black enslaved people were forbidden from reading or writing and therefore had to learn English through listening. It also sounds the way it sounds because it adopted different speech patterns, phrasings, pronunciations, etc. from Standard English. So some examples of words would be, so in Standard English, fixing to would become finna in AAVE, and trying to would become trina. It sounds really similar to a lot of Southern dialects, but a lot of the vocabulary is different. AAVE also varies depending on the region of the U.S., so AAVE speakers in Chicago would have different words and pronunciations from AAVE speakers in Atlanta. A lot of the words that are now popular today also came from AAVE spoken by Black and Latinx LGBTQ+ people in New York City. So for example, the phrase serving a look is from that culture, called ballroom culture in New York. And so through that culture, LGBTQ+ people were able to express themselves and present themselves in a way that society would not allow them to at the time. Ballroom gave people a space to feel beautiful, appreciated, etc., in a world where they were often not able to obtain jobs, safety, security, etc., without sacrificing their identity. Some examples of ballroom culture in the mainstream would be the show Pose, RuPaul's Drag Race, or Madonna's song Vogue. So this next part is from a piece in The Atlantic from a few years ago, and it's about a speech pathologist named Julie Washington. And so she argues that children who speak dialects such as AAVE should be treated similarly to English as a second language students when learning to read and write, because AAVE can be really different from Standard English. So this also relates to something called code switching, which is when people speak multiple dialects and switch between the two depending on the situation they're in. And so some people are able to code switch naturally, but for many others, this skill does not come naturally, and those are the students who often end up falling behind in school because code switching doesn't come naturally, and so that's something that they need to be taught as part of their curriculum.
I want to just add something. It's also very prominent in more private schools, because a lot of African American students that actually do attend them have been taught a certain way how to talk and be grammatically correct. So it's more prevalent, in private schools, but also in other schools as well.
Exactly. So there was a study in 1973 that discovered that children who answered questions correctly, but who were frequently interrupted for their usage of AAVE, would eventually just remain silent in class and ultimately score poorly on reading and writing exams. So there's kind of a disparity between the different dialects that are spoken in the US, and then that ends up affecting people's education in the future. There was also an elementary school in Michigan that the pathologist Julie Washington studied, where when teachers implemented a bilingual curriculum for the majority Black student body, they saw a 75% increase in the number of students who passed state reading tests. Okay, so here is a case from 1991 that actually happened in Pittsburgh, and it had to do with housing discrimination. And so in 1991, it was discovered in East Liberty that the National Apartment Leasing Company, also known as NALCO, was specifically discriminating against Black people. So what would happen was the people who would take calls at NALCO would get a call from someone that they thought was a Black person because they would hear AAVE in the speech patterns of that person, and they would indicate on a sheet of paper that that person was probably Black, and then they would not offer an apartment to that person. So here's a very clear example of just a couple decades ago, people specifically being discriminated against simply for the way they speak. So nowadays, a lot of vocabulary from AAVE has gone mainstream. As you can see on this slide, these are a lot of words that large corporations used and profited off of the words, because now a lot of AAVE vocabulary is considered cool by younger audiences. And while this is some ways just something that happens when different subcultures are able to interact with one another, there still disparities exist depending on who's using AAVE and who isn't. So now we're going to start to look at some examples from social media in order to illustrate AAVE disparities and the perpetuation of age-old stereotypes even today. So part of what's tricky about it is that language is shared and words go in and out of style, but there still are disparities. So for example, on this slide, we have two people from TikTok and Vine who are non-native AAVE speakers, and so they adopted that dialect in order to gain popularity or profit. And then we also have some two others like Jay Versace on this slide who are natural AAVE speakers and are just, sharing their culture when they speak in that way. But there is a difference between when someone just adopts the dialect in order to be cool and to profit versus when that's someone's way of speaking and there are still people who get discriminated against in normal life and professional settings for using that dialect.
Okay, so another example of this is with Jalea Harmon and Charli D'Amelio. So basically the dance on TikTok that went viral was created by Jalea Harmon on the Dub Smash app of fall of 2019. Like a lot of content, the original Dub Smash video was shared to other platforms. For example, the app TikTok. It was very popularized on that app. But the difference was that in the past social media, sharing apps like Dub Smash and Instagram, the norm had been to give the original creator credit by tagging them when content was shared across platforms. But on TikTok, this culture was not yet established, and what ended up happening was that predominantly non-Black TikTokers would, do the dance and the content of, Black creators and not tag them. As a result, people like Charli D'Amelio got insanely popular, and they created successful careers with brand deals and etc., while the original creator remains comparatively irrelevant. Luckily, in the case of Jalea and Charli, credit had since been given to Jalea, and she's gotten the type of dance and choreography exposure that she was hoping for and that she deserved, but not all others are as fortunate as Jalea. Now we're going to look at another aspect of Black culture, which is hair. During the transatlantic slave trade, the heads of enslaved people would be shaved. This was done because in Africa, you could often determine what tribe somebody belonged to and their status solely by their hairstyle. In order to have a successful system of slavery in which Black people were considered inherently inferior, the identities of Black people had been taken away, and shaving head was a way of doing so. During slavery, hair product resources were limited, and people really had only one day a week to take care of their personal hygiene, which was Sundays. So enslaved people needed a way of doing their hair that would stay in place all week long, and so cornrows became very popular. In parts of South America, cornrows were also used to tell escape messages. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, Madam C.J. Walker was recorded as the first female self-made millionaire in the Guinness Book of World Records. She developed a line of hair care products for Black people. Though these products did not encourage natural hairstyles, they helped Black people assimilate to culture and that rejected their natural hair. Having the correct products, like Walker's products, helped people appear what was considered more professional and appropriate at the time. Here are some words that are often associated with Black hairstyles, particularly in professional settings. In 2019, Kerryon Washington was denied a job at Six Flags in Fort Worth, Texas, because of his hair. Another celebrity commenter said Zendaya looked like she smelled like patchouli oil when she wrote dreadlocks at a red carpet. But when the Kardashians and other white celebrities wear Black hairstyles that are trending, they're seen as, beautiful, they're deemed as cool and trendy for doing so. But the Black people, celebrities don't usually get as much recognition or experience discrimination. Monique Coleman from High School Musical, Tatiana Gabrielle, and other actresses on the screen have all talked about their experiences in the film and entertainment industry regarding their hair. They explained that there aren't enough members of the glam team behind the scenes that know how to work with African American hair texture. In an interview, Monique Coleman explains how when filming High School Musical, the hair and makeup artist had done her hair very poorly in the front, so they decided to put a headband on her and make it a part of her character. Many of the other actresses shown on the slide explained that they either had to come on the set with their hair done and ready, or actually do it themselves numerous times. They stressed the fact that they had to stay up braiding their own hair each night or go out of their way to find somebody in the city in which they were filming to do their hair. This relates to the issue of not only not having enough Black hair makeup artists hired in the industry, but also the issue that there aren't enough makeup artists that are non-black who also know how to work with and style black hair.
So this is a song that Solange, who's Beyonce's sister, wrote in 2016, and it's called Don't Touch My Hair. And so we wanted to include it just because it's kind of a perfect example of reclaiming the love of one's hair, especially for black people who often historically their hair has not been considered something beautiful. And so this song was written in response to the microaggression that many black women have experienced of people thinking that it's okay to just touch their hair without asking permission. This next slide is a movie or a short film that you may have seen last year. It's called Hair Love, or 2 years ago, it was 2019. And it was created by a former NFL player, and it's super important because in the movie it follows a black father and daughter who are struggling to figure out how to do hair because the mom actually has cancer. And so it's really important because it shows a present and capable black father, which contrasts the stereotype of the black man being an absent, incompetent father. It also challenges gender stereotypes because a lot of the time, regardless of race, the father is expected to not know how to do the hair, and it's just supposed to be on the mom. So this is a really good short film. I definitely recommend checking it out. That's all we have for you today. We'll also be back on the 22nd, and other members of the VSU will be doing some spoken word.
So, yeah, look
Thank
forward
you.
to it. Thanks.